Mom abandoned me for her new family, then demands I fund college for her kids. Okay, here goes. To really get why I'm so pissed, I need to rewind a bit. My mom had me young, like just turned 20. My dad? Well, he was basically a sperm donor. Mom told me he bailed the second he heard pregnant. They weren't even together long, so she let him go without asking for child support or anything. Just washed her hands of him. She said it was easier that way. And honestly, as a kid, I didn't really get it. I just knew I didn't have a dad around, and that was that. I was raised by mom and my grandparents. They were pretty solid, always there when we needed them, and they helped mom get her act together. She finished school, got a decent job, and things were okay for a while. I'd say we had a normal single-parent family life. She dated a few guys here and there, nothing serious. Then came Tom. I was about 8 when mom met Tom. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember her coming home looking all giddy, like she'd just hit the jackpot or something. And as a kid, you don't think too hard about this stuff. I was just like, cool, mom's happy. When Tom started coming around more, I thought it was kind of nice. He was all right, didn't give me any grief, and he'd play catch with me sometimes or take me to the park. Normal stuff. Fast forward a few years, and they're getting married. I was around 12 at the time, and while I wasn't exactly super close to Tom, I didn't mind him either. He was just there. We weren't a tight-knit family or anything, but we got along, and that was enough for me. After they got married, things changed a little. I noticed my mom being a bit more distant. Nothing crazy, but just small stuff like she'd spend way more time with Tom and less with me. Sometimes I'd walk into the room, and she'd stop whatever conversation they were having like I wasn't supposed to hear it. I'd ask her what they were talking about, and she'd just brush it off, saying it was adult stuff. I guess it's normal, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting a little. Things really shifted when I was around 16. Mom and Tom had been married a while, and then she gets pregnant. Not just once, but with twins. Suddenly, they were like a real family unit, and I was, I don't know, just kind of there. I tried to be supportive. I was genuinely excited to have siblings and was happy for my mom. She'd been through a lot raising me on her own, and I thought this would be a good thing. But looking back, I was pretty clueless about what was coming. Once she was pregnant, things started feeling off. It was like I was an outsider in my own house. I'd try to talk to her, ask her how she was feeling or if she needed help with anything, and she'd just get annoyed. At first, I brushed it off as her just being stressed out. Pregnancy isn't easy, right? But it kept happening. Like, every time I tried to do anything helpful, she'd snap at me. Stuff like, just give me some space, okay, or I can't handle this right now. So, I backed off. I figured maybe she just needed her own time, or whatever. Then the twins were born, and man, that's when things went from weird to full-on messed up. I remember coming home from school one day, and the house was just different. There were baby things everywhere. Mom and Tom were running around all stressed, and I felt like I didn't fit in. They were totally focused on the twins. I mean, I get it, they're babies, they need a lot of attention. But it was like I'd turned invisible. For the next few months, it was all about the twins. Every conversation, every family thing, it was all about them. I kept trying to be part of it, to be a good older sibling, but they just kind of shut me out. Mom especially. Like, if I so much as asked her to come to one of my soccer games, she'd look at me like I just asked her to fly to the moon. I'm busy with the babies, she'd say, every time. Eventually, I stopped asking. I stopped expecting her to be there for me at all. Then one day, she and Tom sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked all serious, like they were about to break some big news. I honestly thought they were going to tell me we were moving or something. But nah, this was way worse. Mom starts off saying, we need to have a talk about the future. Then Tom jumps in, talking about how things are tight with the twins, and they're struggling to make ends meet. I just sat there nodding, thinking, okay, where's this going? And then she drops it. We think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else. I was stunned. What, like move out? Not exactly, Tom said, but he was full of crap. That's exactly what they wanted. They just tried to soften it by saying they couldn't support everyone and needed to focus on the twins. Mom was all like, you're almost an adult. You need to start learning to be independent. I was 16. I didn't even have my own car, let alone a plan for where I'd go. They knew I didn't have a job that paid more than peanuts, but they just didn't care. I tried to reason with them. I offered to get a part-time job to help out more around the house, whatever it would take to stay. But Mom shut that down real quick. She said the twins needed the resources more than I did, and that it was time I learned to take care of myself. She made it sound like they were doing me a favor by pushing me out. It was like they'd already made up their minds, and nothing I said would change it. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I left, packed a bag, went to my grandparents' house, and that was it. No goodbye, no we'll miss you. Just gone. I didn't even know where to go, really, but my grandparents, bless them, didn't even question it. They just took me in, no strings attached. I stayed up that night, just replaying the conversation over and over. It was like this whole thing was a bad dream, but I was wide awake. I mean, who does that? Who just decides their kid is too much and shoves them out? They didn't even give me a chance to prepare or make a plan. They just wanted me gone, so they could play happy family without me. And honestly, that's when I knew I was done with them. They didn't want me. They wanted a fresh start without the baggage of a kid they hadn't planned for. So, yeah, that's how it all started. After my mom and Tom kicked me out, I crashed at my grandparents' place. They didn't ask many questions, just let me settle in and made sure I was okay. I could tell they were hurt by what my mom did. They didn't say it directly, but every now and then I'd catch my grandma looking at me with this sad look, like she just couldn't wrap her head around it. Life with my grandparents was stable, but I knew I couldn't lean on them forever. They were getting older, and I didn't want to be a burden. I was already trying to figure out how I could make things work for myself. I was 16, barely scraping by at my part-time job, which was paying pennies. I was juggling school, work, and the feeling that I'd been totally cut off from my own family. Fun times. Meanwhile, my mom and Tom just kept living their best lives. I'd hear from people in town that they'd been showing off the twins everywhere, like they were the perfect little family. And me? I was just forgotten. Sometimes I wondered if they even noticed I was gone. They never called, never checked in, nothing. Just radio silence. Once I turned 18, I knew I needed to figure things out fast. My grandparents were supportive, but they weren't exactly loaded. They couldn't pay for college, and I didn't want to rely on them for more than I already had. So, I decided I'd go to college on my own terms. I applied for every scholarship, grant, and loan I could think of. My aunt stepped up, bless her heart, and co-signed one of my loans, basically giving me the one shot I needed to get in. The reality of college hit hard, though. I had to work a job, or two sometimes, to keep up with the bills. It was brutal. Full days of classes, then straight to work, then hours of studying at night. Sometimes I'd run on maybe 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. My friends were out there enjoying the college experience, while I was just trying to survive it. But honestly, I didn't mind. I was used to hustling. I was used to doing things on my own. And still, not a word from my mom. Not for my birthday, not for Christmas. Nothing. I graduated, and the only people who showed up were my grandparents and my aunt. I scanned the crowd, maybe hoping to see my mom there, even if she'd just come to stand in the back. But no, she wasn't there. And that was the moment I finally accepted she didn't care. She didn't care about me, and she probably never would. But I was done feeling sorry for myself. I had a degree, I had loans to pay off, and I was determined to make something of myself. I managed to land a decent entry-level job right after graduation, and I took it as a fresh start. I got my own tiny apartment, barely enough room to breathe, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. Those first few years out of college were rough. My pay was just enough to scrape by. I was living paycheck to paycheck, hitting ramen noodle levels of broke. But I was doing it. My mom, in her infinite wisdom, apparently heard through the grapevine that I was making it. But still, no contact, which, honestly, was fine by me. I didn't need her validation. I was working hard, and I was proud of myself, even if no one else was. Eventually, things started looking up. I got promoted a couple of times, started earning more, and for the first time, I wasn't constantly stressing about bills. I could finally breathe a little, save a little, and think about the future without that constant pressure weighing me down. I was actually building a life for myself. And then, the cherry on top of this mess. My aunt, the one who co-signed my loan and basically gave me my shot, ran into my mom at some family gathering. She must have mentioned my recent promotion, because suddenly my mom knew I was actually doing well. And guess what? That's when she decided it was time to reach out. I remember the day she showed up at my door like it was burned into my brain. I hadn't seen her in years. When I opened the door, it felt surreal, like some kind of weird family reunion I hadn't signed up for. She was standing there with Tom, and they both had this forced smile plastered on their faces. You know the kind of smile you wear when you're trying to make something uncomfortable feel normal? Hey, it's been a while, she said, like we'd just been casual friends who hadn't caught up in a while, not a mother who hadn't bothered with her kid in years. I didn't even know what to say, so I just stared. Part of me was still that teenager who wanted her to care, who wanted her to say she'd made a mistake. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I'd lived without her for years, and I'd learned how to live on my own. I just stood there, half in shock, half pissed off that she had the audacity to show up now, after everything. She started going on about how she heard I'd been doing well, that my aunt mentioned I'd been promoted. It felt like she was building up to something, and I was already getting a sinking feeling. Tom chimed in, trying to make small talk about how proud they were of me. Yeah, sure. They'd acted like I didn't exist for years, and now they're proud? Give me a break. Then she hit me with it. She said things had been hard for them lately, that Tom's business wasn't doing so well, and oh yeah, the twins were about to start college. It didn't take a genius to see where this was going. She was here because she wanted something. After all these years, the first time she shows up at my door, and it's not to reconnect, it's to ask for a handout. I told her I wasn't interested in hearing a sob story, and that if she was just there for money, she could leave. She had the nerve to act offended, like she couldn't believe I'd say that. She started laying on the guilt, talking about how she'd raised me on her own, how she'd sacrificed so much, and now was the time for me to give back. I almost laughed in her face. This woman hadn't given a crap about me in years, and now she was trying to cash in on all the years she spent raising me? I shut her down. I told her I wasn't responsible for her decisions, and I sure as hell wasn't about to fund the college dreams of kids I barely knew. She kept going on, trying to guilt me, but I'd heard enough. I told her she could go and live her life just like she'd wanted to when she threw me out. That's when her fake smile dropped, and she started showing her true colors. She said I was being ungrateful and selfish, that I should respect her for all she'd done for me. I just told her that whatever she thought she'd done, she'd lost any right to ask me for anything when she tossed me aside like trash. They left after that, both of them looking pissed. I shut the door, still half in shock, but also relieved. I knew I'd made the right choice. They were out of my life for a reason, and I was done with them for good. After I turned my mom and Tom away, I thought that was the end of it. I figured they'd be pissed, but they'd just go back to their lives, right? Wrong. Mom was on a mission. It started with emails. I'd blocked her everywhere else, so she went old school and started blowing up my inbox. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 emails. It was constant. Every time I'd check my messages, there'd be a new one from her. The emails were a trip. She'd start off all sweet, talking about how she missed me and how it hurt that we'd grown so far apart. But as soon as I didn't respond, she'd get nasty. She started listing all the sacrifices she'd made for me, like she was running some kind of mom scoreboard. I did everything for you, she'd say, and this is how you repay me? Then she'd go on about how I was selfish for not helping my family now that I was successful. The guilt tripping was turned up to 11. I ignored it at first. I'd learned to tune her out years ago, so I just thought she'd eventually get tired and stop. But nope. When she realized the emails weren't working, she went next level and showed up at my job. I didn't know any of this until after the fact, but apparently, she showed up in the lobby asking for me by name, saying she was my mom and that it was an emergency. Luckily, I was out that day because of a migraine. The receptionist, bless her heart, tried telling Mom that I wasn't in, but she wouldn't listen. She started making a scene, saying it was family business and she needed to see me right away. Security finally had to ask her to leave, and when she still wouldn't go, they called the cops. She finally took off after that. The next day, my boss calls me in his office and tells me what happened. I was mortified. Here I am, trying to make a name for myself at this company, and my mom is out there treating it like her own personal soapbox. I apologized to my boss and told him I'd take care of it. I knew I had to set things straight with her, so I reached out to her. My first mistake. I called her up, and the second she picked up, she was already on me, saying how rude my work was to her and how I'd better teach them to respect their elders. I told her she had no right to show up at my job and make a scene and that she needed to back off once and for all. But she didn't care. She launched into this whole rant about how I was selfish and ungrateful, how I'd been ignoring her sacrifices and treating her like she was nothing after all she'd done for me. I told her to cut the act and stop pretending she was some martyr. You want to treat me like an adult? Fine. But adults don't just barge in and start making demands the second they think you're doing okay for yourself. Then she dropped the real bomb. You owe me? She actually said it like it was some kind of legally binding debt. She told me that since she'd raised me alone, I was supposed to help her and my siblings now that I was successful. She said that I was morally responsible for paying back everything she'd done for me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Look, I said, trying to keep my cool, I'm not responsible for the choices you made. I didn't ask to be born, and I sure didn't ask to be kicked out when you decided you had a new family. I told her that if she thought guilt tripping was going to change anything, she was dead wrong. I hung up after that, blocked her new number, and thought maybe that would finally send the message. But of course, she found another way. She made a new email address and started up again. Same crap, different day. She'd go from being all poor me to outright nasty in the same message. After all I've done for you, you just turn your back on me, she'd write, acting like I owed her a fortune. She'd tell me that I was cold and selfish, and that family comes first. It was like a broken record, over and over. My grandparents were still in contact with her, mostly because they wanted to see the twins now and then. They didn't want to lose their relationship with my half-siblings, and I got that. I didn't ask them to pick sides or anything. But eventually, the whole situation came up when I was over at their house, and they asked what was going on. I laid it all out for them. Everything she'd been doing, all the demands she'd made. My grandpa just shook his head, and my grandma was practically speechless. They were as disgusted as I was, but they told me they'd try talking to her. They must have had a conversation, because the emails stopped for a little while. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally backed off. I even let myself relax a bit, thinking I'd gotten through to her. But nope, not even close. One day, I got an email, but this one wasn't like the others. It was short, just a few lines, but it was loaded with threats. She said that if I didn't meet with her, she'd have to take further action. She didn't specify what that meant, but the tone was clear. She was trying to scare me into giving in. I didn't know if she was serious or if it was just another one of her guilt-tripping tactics, but it was enough to get me looking over my shoulder. I ended up reaching out to my aunt, the same one who co-signed my loan, and explained what was going on. She was furious, saying my mom was way out of line and that I should just go no contact for good. She suggested that I talk to a lawyer, maybe even consider a restraining order. I wasn't sure if that was overkill or not, but at this point, I was so fed up that I was willing to consider it. I replied to my mom's email, trying to keep it brief and professional, just saying I wouldn't be meeting with her and that she needed to stop contacting me. I told her that if she kept harassing me, I'd be forced to take legal action. I hoped it would scare her off, but honestly, I doubted it. Mom wasn't the type to back down when she thought she was owed something. Sure enough, the next morning, there was a voicemail from her, practically begging me to reconsider. She said she was desperate, that things had gotten so bad for her and Tom, and she couldn't believe I'd just leave them hanging. I listened to it once, deleted it, and blocked the number. I was done. For the first time, I finally saw her for who she really was. She wasn't here to reconnect, to make amends, or to build a relationship. She just saw me as a way out of her mess, and she was willing to do whatever it took to guilt me, threaten me, and manipulate me into giving her what she wanted. So, yeah, I had my answer. She'd burned that bridge long ago, and now she was standing in the ashes, wondering why I wouldn't help her rebuild. And after everything, I was perfectly fine leaving it all behind. Update. After I blocked my mom's number and ignored her emails, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally gotten the point across. I was clear with her. I didn't owe her anything, I wasn't going to fund her life, and if she kept pushing, I'd get legal help. I honestly thought that was the end of it, but I clearly underestimated just how desperate she'd become. The woman was relentless. A week after the last voicemail, I got home from work and saw her car parked outside my apartment building. I froze, feeling a mix of anger and dread. This woman just didn't know when to quit. I knew if I went inside, it would probably turn into a full-blown confrontation, but I couldn't exactly avoid going home either. I took a deep breath, walked past her car, and tried to ignore her as I headed up to my apartment. I hoped she'd get the hint and leave, but as soon as I got to my door, I heard footsteps behind me. She followed me up. Before I could even get my keys in the lock, she started on her usual spiel. "Do you really think this is fair?" she demanded, her voice all shaky like she was about to cry. "After everything I did for you, you're just going to turn your back on me?" I didn't even want to engage, but I was tired. Tired of the emails, tired of the voicemails, tired of the guilt-tripping and the surprise pop-ups. I turned around and faced her, trying to keep my cool. "Look, we've already been over this," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You decided I wasn't part of your family years ago. I don't owe you anything. So stop showing up on my job, stop emailing me, and stop coming to my apartment." She looked at me like I just slapped her. "You're acting like I kicked you out for no reason. You were old enough to take care of yourself. You didn't need me anymore," she argued, her voice rising. "But now you have a responsibility to your siblings. They're family." I couldn't believe the nerve. "You're right. I didn't need you. I figured it out on my own. But guess what? That means I don't owe you or anyone else a thing." That's when she lost it. She started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how she sacrificed everything to raise me alone, and how I was turning my back on her when she needed me most. It felt like we were stuck in this endless loop where she'd ran about all the things she'd done for me, like I was supposed to be eternally grateful. But the way I saw it, a parent doesn't get to hold raising their kid over their head forever, especially not when they kick that kid out when it's convenient. I tried to walk inside, but she stepped forward and blocked me. I told her again that she needed to leave, but she just kept going, switching from angry to pathetic in the blink of an eye. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere else to turn. The twins need a chance. I just need a little help. That's all. After everything I've done, you can't just leave us like this." At that point, I'd had enough. I took out my phone and told her that if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to take it that far. But I was serious. I wasn't going to keep putting up with this. She must have seen that I meant it because she finally stepped back, looking defeated. She muttered something about me being heartless and cold, but I didn't care. I'd heard it all before. She turned and stormed off down the hall, but before she disappeared, she threw one last thing over her shoulder. "You'll regret this someday. Family is all you have. When everyone else turns their back, you'll remember who took care of you." I just stood there, watching her walk away, feeling this mix of relief and sadness. I knew she wouldn't change, but it was like a final nail in the coffin. This was the woman who raised me, and all she saw me as now was a meal ticket, a quick fix to her problems. There was no point in hoping for a happy ending with her. She'd made her choice a long time ago, and so had I. I went inside, locked the door, and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It felt like I'd finally taken the last step in closing that chapter of my life. She'd shown me over and over who she really was, and I was done pretending she'd ever be anything else. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer to talk about a restraining order. I didn't know if I had enough to actually get one, but I figured it was worth looking into. I wasn't going to live my life constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to show up. The lawyer advised me to document everything: emails, voicemails, the incident at my job, and now her coming to my apartment. He said it might be enough to build a case, but he'd keep me posted. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking control. I wasn't just reacting to her anymore. I was putting up a wall and making it clear that I wasn't here to be manipulated or guilt-tripped. I'd spent years feeling like I was just a burden to her, someone she tolerated until she found something better. But now I knew better. I didn't need her approval or her love, if that's what you could even call it. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I threw myself into work, spent time with friends, and even started thinking about moving to a new apartment. It felt like the perfect time to start fresh, away from all the drama she kept dragging me into. I was ready to build a life on my own terms, without her hovering in the background, waiting for her next chance to swoop in. Final update. So here we are. After everything I've been through with my mom, I thought I'd seen it all: the guilt trips, the stalking at my job, showing up in my apartment unannounced. But just when I thought she'd finally backed off, she managed to outdo herself in the worst possible way. A few days after my last post, I got home from work and found her waiting outside my door again. This time, she looked completely unhinged, like she hadn't slept in days. Eyes all bloodshot, practically vibrating with anger. I knew right then that this wasn't going to be one of her usual "let's talk" situations. Before I could even say a word, she started screaming at me. I couldn't catch everything, but it was the usual crap. Selfish, ungrateful, you'll regret this. But then she got physical. She grabbed my arm, yanked me, and started screaming that I was ruining her life, that I owed her for everything she'd done for me. I pulled away, told her to get out of my face, and reached for my phone to call the cops. That's when she really lost it. She actually lunged at me, knocking the phone out of my hand and shoving me against the wall. I couldn't believe it. I never thought she'd go this far, but there she was, completely losing her mind, trying to physically intimidate me. Luckily, one of my neighbors heard the commotion and came out to see what was happening. When they saw what was going on, they called the police right away. The cops showed up within minutes, thank God, and they separated us. My mom was still screaming, going on about how I was abandoning my family and how I'd pay for this. The cops took her outside, and I finally got a chance to explain the whole mess to them. I told them everything, how she'd been harassing me, showing up at my job, ambushing me in my apartment, and now this. After a bit of back and forth, they ended up arresting her for assault. I was shaking, barely processing what had just happened, but I knew it was the right call. This had gone way past family drama. This was straight up harassment and now assault. They took her away, and that's when I knew I was absolutely 100% done. The next morning I called my lawyer, explained everything, and got started on the restraining order. I handed over every piece of evidence I had, the emails, the voicemails, the police report from her showing up at my work, and now this latest incident. The lawyer said I had more than enough for a solid case and that we'd get everything in place as soon as possible. It felt surreal, but at the same time, it felt like closure, like I'd finally hit a point where I could walk away without looking back. In the days after, I heard from a couple of family members who'd found out what happened. Apparently, my mom had been telling people that I was the one who'd abandoned her, that she'd sacrificed everything to raise me, and I'd turned into some heartless monster. But you know what? I didn't even care anymore. I didn't care about her guilt trips, her lies, or her desperation to make me look like the villain. I was done letting her control any part of my life. Since then, she's been trying to contact my grandparents, hoping they'll convince me to reconcile. They told me she's been crying to anyone who'll listen, saying I destroyed her life. But my grandparents know the truth. They supported me through all of this, and they told her straight up that she was out of line, that her behavior was insane, and that I had every right to cut her off. Even my aunt, who tried to keep the peace, finally told her to get some help and stop treating me like her personal ATM. I started making plans to move. I'm not going to let her find out where I'm living next, and I'm setting up as many boundaries as possible to keep her out of my life for good. It sucks that it had to come to this, but at the same time, it's a relief. I don't feel guilty or conflicted anymore. I've done everything I could to set boundaries, to tell her no, to be firm, and she chose to blow past all of it. She chose to treat me like a wallet on legs, not a son. And I finally had enough. So, yeah, I'm done. No more emails. No more voicemails. No more surprise visits. The restraining order's in place. I'm moving, and I'm putting as much distance as I can between me and her. Family or not, I'm not putting up with this level of toxicity. She made her choices, and I'm making mine. If you're reading this and dealing with something similar, I guess my advice is this. Don't feel guilty for cutting off people who treat you like crap, even if they're family. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind, your financial stability, or your mental health just because you're related. Some people are toxic, no matter the connection, and the best thing you can do is walk away and take care of yourself. Thanks to everyone who's been following this mess and supporting me through it. It's been a long road, but I'm finally free, and I couldn't be more relieved.